Good afternoon, and welcome to the book launch of the digital edition of People Power, an Eyewitness History, the Philippine Revolution of 1986. This event was co organized or is being presented by the Ateneo de Manila University Press, the Department of Interdisciplinary Studies, the School of Humanities, the School of Social Sciences, and the Ateneo Martial Law Museum. Good afternoon, everybody. I am Dr. Nikki Carci Cruz. I am chair of the Department of Interdisciplinary Studies, and I am very privileged, I feel, to be part of the group that organized this event. You see, I grew up in a home that had this book in our shelf or in our coffee table. It was easily accessible to me. I have memories of this book, and I continue to use it as I teach my classes in nonviolence. I'm excited to begin, as I hope all of you are. Let's start with an invocation to be led by Dr. Rafael Brion of the Department of Interdisciplinary Studies. Rafael, please lead us in prayer.
Saglit tayong manahimik at maglimit. Sa gitna ng agam-agam at hilahil, may nananatiling bumubukal, may palaging sumisikdo. Sama-sama magkakabalikat, kapit-bisig ang mga nananalig, umaasam, umaasa, kumikilos. Ang nagningas nooy patuloy na umaalab, lalong tumitindi ang lakas ng bayan.
Thank you very much. Rafael wears several hats in this gathering. He was chair of the IS department, which is a co-organizer of the event. He's also with the campus ministry office, so we invited him to lead us in prayer. But he was also senior editor of the People Power book. And ayon nga sa kanya, nag-aalab pa rin ang apoy ng paglaban at pag-asa na nagparikit sa librong ito. Thank you very much, Rafael. A lot of the people who take part in this book launch have a personal stake. They have memories not just of EDSA, but also of the book. And that is also the case for the person who will give us the welcome remarks. Dr. Marlu Vilches has a message for us, and we're going to listen to it. She's our vice president for the Loyola Schools, also newly appointed vice president for higher education of Ateneo de Manila. Let us all listen to VP Marlu Vilches.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to the launch of this book in digital form. This is launch of a good memory, not just a good memory, but an inspiring event that should stay for all the rest of our own history, and that should run in the bloodstream of our people. This is a launch, but this is also a way of remembering. Ateneo does not forget. Ateneo remembers. And this is such a delightful way of remembering, launching this book in digital form. And many will be able to have access to this book. I've been reading this book again, rereading this book, and I'd like to just quote what President Cory Aquino said. And this is still true today, and I hope that we will be inspired by what she said. She said, "In the dark days before liberation, I said that I believe God is on our side and that we have nothing to fear. I truly believe that He is not only on our side, He actively intervened and fought by our side. How else can we explain many of the events in the days that just passed? I pray that He will continue to be by our side in the difficult yet challenging days to come. I'm confident that He will not fail us. Our cause is just. God is beside us. We can face the coming trials." that still rings true actually today. It's like a fresh start again. And I hope that this launch will bring back those memories that will inspire us to continue to march ahead with God on our side. And this is because today is a day of commemoration. We also recall what we often sing at Mass to say that we remember, we celebrate, we believe. So, welcome to this launch and enjoy the rest of the time. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Again, that was Dr. Marlu Vilches. You know, I was just at the department when Brother Joseph Patrick Echevarria was returning the personal copy of Rafael Brion's book to the office. And we happened to meet there. He said, I am going to turn this into a PDF so I could spread it with permission from the publishers to as many people as possible because we want to remember. And I said, I want in. We want to join. And we wrote VP Marlu, and she has been very supportive from the very start. And when we wrote that email, she said, make it a collaboration between the School of Humanities and the School of Social Sciences. And the deans of those schools are here. I acknowledge Dean Jonathan Chua and Dean Bopip Saloma, who are here with us in the Zoom room. And then Jonathan said, let's do it the correct way, the legal way through the Ateneo Press by turning it into an ebook. And when we contacted um, the director of the Ateneo Press, Ms. Karina Bolasco, she moved very, very fast. Let us now listen to the words from the publisher, from Ms. Karina Bolasco, for her opening remarks.
At a time when memories become the site of contestation, when political camps pull them out to the front or push them into forgetting, I find wise and endearing a simple event of sharing as a community what we remember of those days of February 22 to 25, 1986. It is what we do in our homes, our town hall, our church, our plaza, our classrooms, and other shared public spaces. We simply share what we saw, what we felt, and what we did to be part of what was happening to millions of Filipinos who gathered at EDSA and the million others who chose to listen instead to June Keithley on DZRJ and pray for the multitudes on EDSA. Television stations were then under Marcos's control. As Lisandro Claudio analyzes the event in his book, Taming People's Power, he says, and I quote, I propose the study of people power as a national myth that is constructed, negotiated, and challenged by actors from heterogeneous subject positions, close quotes. And that is what I like about people power and eyewitness history, the Philippine Revolution of 1986. It was put together by a brigade of more than 60 people who gathered the stories and photographs of as many participants who were at EDSA on one of those days, or even some who stayed for the duration of 4 days. The 1986 People Power Revolution had a resonance across classes, not just among the middle class or the elite. It must be understood not just as an objective event, because nothing is objective to a participant who went based on his or her conviction, interacted with many others, feared for their lives when the tanks approached and the helicopters grazed above their heads. And when no violence erupted and Marcos and the family decided to leave and be flown away, the jubilation of the crowd was palpable. All the feelings and energies which surrounded the event, different perhaps in specifics of time and location for every Filipino, for every group that was there, but overall and collectively, they were the same. And all those, the sensation, the consciousness, the impression, turned it into mythology. This is the project, to gather more recollections across classes, across generations, and maybe get them into the 40th edition of this People Power book. I think this is how we breathe new life into this book. This is how we continue to validate important shared memories. When shared, memories strengthen our sense of identity as a community and bind more tightly our relationships. They build our knowledge of ourselves and our world. And when experiences we recall are emotional, they become a source of tremendous power in our lives. Memories need to be shared. As they say, I don't remember who said it, but the past beats inside of me like a second heart. Humans, not places, make memories. So we were EDSA. We were the people power of 1986.
Thank you very much. She ended by talking about memories. And before I share and read what is on your screen, I'd like to say that many of the people in the Zoom we gathered testimonials from. To lead up to this event, we tried to gather stories, memories of EDSA, or memories of the People Power book, owning it and what people learned from it. And so some of the people here, Von Totanes, Vanessa, Vani Bicomong, Ma'am Tina Montiel, the first one was Rafael Brion, Robbie Mercado, um, Ma'am Marichi Guevara of IS, Rina Mapa, um, Leah Castaneda, Anastasio, um, Dennis Batangan, Sarge Lacuesta, contributed their testimonials that can be seen and we gathered in a Facebook page we created just for curating, not curating, collecting all stories that we could get. Thank you to all of you. I'm acknowledging you for sharing your stories. But the first person to answer our call was actually Sir Jimmy Abad. He was the first. If I released the email asking for stories and testimonials in less than 20 minutes, he had already given his reply. And this was what he said: we were all there, my family with friends. Any country is only as strong as her people's memory. Memory is imagination's heartland. What one recalls, one imagines. There, in one's own imagination, the past event, whatever one recalls, resurrects, comes alive again. To think well is also to imagine well. National Artist for Literature, Jimmy Abad, shared this with us. And now we go to another message. This one will be read for us. In your screen, you can see a snapshot. It's too small for you to read. It's not meant for reading, but just to give you an idea that there was a young lady who wrote this testimonial in that book as a voice of the youth then. That was Anne Mercado. She was senior editor at the time. And now she wrote the foreword or the introduction for the digital edition, which she will share with us. Um, Anne, you have the
Thank you, Nikki, and welcome everybody. Introduction to the 37th anniversary digital edition of the People Power and Eyewitness History. My parents, Antonio and Munina Mercado, published this book 40 years ago, propelled by their conviction that the 1986 Philippine Revolution was a miracle that had to be documented with urgency while the memory was still fresh in people's minds, and while we still carried the spirit of peaceful, nonviolent change in our hearts. We were witnesses to a spiritual phenomenon that could not yet be fully explained. Their instinct was to gather first person accounts, collect them raw, just to establish facts. Where were you? What did you see? How did you feel? Being a journalist, my mom who is here with us now, kept her sights on future generations who will draw from the book immediate first-hand accounts, evidence of history from people who themselves were in one way or another part of the people power revolution. They also went about it the way believers would document an apparition of the Blessed Virgin Mary, whose intercession and direct hand in the revolution my parents firmly believed in. The production of the book was propelled by people power too. The editorial staff was made up of volunteers, students, young professionals, teachers, artists, advertising executives, and almost anyone willing to work to keep the story alive. My brothers and I, along with our circle of friends, were the workhorses of the editorial team. The effort to collect stories was unprecedented. Because my father was in advertising, radio and newspaper ads called for people to send in their stories and their photographs. This was the age before the smartphones, Twitter, and YouTube. There were no selfies or quick sharing options. We received stories through postal service and through drop boxes at strategic locations. Rafael even remembers that in his Servini dorm room there was a drop box. They were handwritten or typewritten, some on onion skin paper, and others came several pages thick in brown envelopes. Personal photos were also included, printed in Kodak paper and labeled at the back. There was a deluge of contributions, which the team combed through, sorted, and arranged chronologically. Large story gathering events were also organized, one of which was at the Malacanang grounds. It was the first time the palace grounds were officially opened to the people. Crowds converged and people lined up for their chance to share their stories with the volunteers who, armed with cassette recorders at that time, were ready to listen and to document. A good number, waited for hours for their turn to get their story recorded. Unlike today, when experiences can be shared instantly through social media, in those days, people gathered to share in person. Many of the best photojournalists of the day trooped to our makeshift office with contact prints, a sheet of photographic paper, do you remember? With a set of thumbnail images we could choose from. Others came with their most dramatic photos in large size prints ready for publication. They waived their fees and voluntarily contributed to the historic effort to document the revolution. Some of those photos have since become iconic representations of the peaceful uprising readily available through a simple Google search. But try to imagine seeing the images gathered all together for the first time. The young girls offering flowers to soldiers, the nuns standing before tanks clutching rosaries, the phalanx of young students and seminarians holding an image of the Virgin Mary as they anticipated an armed ground assault, and defecting helicopter pilots landing their choppers instead of firing at the ground. These photos are the closest we can get today to what it was like to be out there on the streets then. For 4 days, from February 22, with the crowds growing up till the 25th, when Ferdinand Marcos Sr. and his family finally left. There were some stories we chased after because the historic account would not be complete without their voices. Among those interviewed for the book were President Corazon Aquino, Jaime Cardinal Sin, Ricardo Cardinal Vidal, Aurora Aquino, June Keithley, Eugenia Apostol, Senator Soc Rodrigo, Vicente Paterno, and Freddy Aguilar. Most of them are no longer with us today, but their stories in the book remain vibrant and vital. Work on the book began barely a week after the revolution and was completed in a record time of just 3 months. PCI Bank Human Resources Development Foundation provided the grant that financed the printing of the book. It was launched in spectacular fashion at Camp Aguinaldo, at a gathering to announce the members of the Philippine Constitutional Commission of 1986, with then Colonel Gregorio Gringo Honasan parachuting out of a helicopter carrying the book to be presented to President Corazon Aquino. The first edition books were quickly sold out, so a second printing was published within a year for local and international distribution with a grant from the Father James B. Reuter SJ Foundation. I was 21 years old then, exactly the age my son is today. His name is Diego and he's from the Ateneo. To many of Diego's generation, the 1986 revolution is a fog, an old story rehashed too many times and revised without shame. It's difficult to connect the dots between 1986 and the political scenario they face today. That's why we are grateful to the Ateneo de Manila University Press and the Ateneo Interdisciplinary Studies Department for presenting this 37th anniversary edition of the People Power book in a new digital format. The book now has all the advanced features we didn't have before: quick sharing, easy access, and immediate engagement. The new edition carries forward the valuable lessons the book held from the beginning: the commitment to collective truth telling and fact gathering, the conviction that history has to be preserved and protected, and the belief that with faith, miracles can still happen for our country. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Anne. We will hear more from her later when we have our conversations. But before that, we will have a special message, a recorded one from the editor of the People Power book, Tita Monina Alarie Mercado.
Three, two, one.
A lot of people uh, uh, made the People Power book. Uh, uh, we were a very big crowd. Uh, uh, Mostly people who helped me uh, in the People Power to gather the news, to post the news, and to be there in Malacanang at the book launching. It was a very happy occasion.
So that was just a brief message, but to give more details to that, we'll have our first conversation with the editors of the People Power book, three of whom are with us today. Rafael Brion was a senior editor, just as Anne was. Even if she was 21 at the time, she was also senior editor of the book. And Robbie Mercado was managing editor. So now we'll just have a brief conversation. Hello, Rafael. Hi, Anne. Hi, Robbie.
Hi,
Uh,
Nikki.
so let's,
Hello.
yeah, Rafael, let's start with you. What are your memories of what did you call that? Bidahan sa Malacanang? Yeah.
Yes. The first thing I remember is that Tita Monina showed us a book of stories told by some people. It was a pocketbook. I don't remember the name. And so we said, "Oh, let's this way." And then one of the things that we thought of was, okay, let's have a bidahan sa Malacanang. We asked people to come. We brought our tape recorders. But one of the best memories I have of it is in my room. I was a prefect in Cervini Hall, and that was a drop-off center. And we got this Manila envelope from one of my favorite screenwriters, Amado La Cuesta. We were looking away to organize the book. And when we saw what we had written, we said, oh my God, this is it. This is jackpot. It was beautiful. And so we used a lot of what Amado La Cuesta wrote. So those are my best memories of producing it.
So para siyang maging backbone or the spine of the storytelling.
Yes,
You,
yes,
you
yes.
would
And
see
I'm glad
build.
that Sarge is with us today.
Yeah, we're gonna get to talk to him in the second conversation. And how do you? There were so many people lining up to share their stories. So how do you uh put things together if there's so much? Or were people typing? Who did the transcribing? How big was your team, and what was the physical home base of this operation?
Okay, that's a great question. It was very much a mom and pop operation, and literally my mom and my pop. We were working first from our dining table at home, and we pulled together our friends, and I pulled my teacher, Rafael Brion, also a friend. And then eventually, when the operations got bigger, we went to my dad's office. We worked from their dining room in the office. So the letters, the stories would come in letters, envelopes that we would open. Somebody was in charge of opening the envelopes. Somebody also was in charge of approaching the photographers. So let me tell you first about the letters coming in envelopes. I mean, I think to today's generation, maybe that's unimaginable, but we were, getting all these paper contributions, and my mom thought of the idea of having boxes. We filed them in boxes. Day one, day two, day three, day four. And so you would drop it in the boxes. And then we were assigned section editors for each date. So one editor was assigned to day one, another editor to day two. So you would read through all the stories that were sent for the day that was relevant to the day that you were assigned. Of course, many people wrote about the 4 days and not just one day. So literally, we were cutting and pasting, literally cutting with scissors and taping together to make them all, to distribute them to the different boxes and eventually to make them all come together. So it was very much exciting. I have to confess something. I was not at EDSA. While my brothers were all over EDSA, two of my brothers were heroes of EDSA, and my brother Robin Wowell were in Libis. I was not in EDSA, so it was quite an experience for me to read this first person accounts.
And in your the PowerPoint slide that was your intro slide, that was a post of what you wrote that you were in Ateneo at the time, and you called this place home base. People were in the quadrangle. Father Bono wanted his TV back because that was the only source of news that you had. So you
Yeah.
were in Ateneo. So obviously. Ateneo is happy to launch this book now because it's part of the storytelling that's there. Before I go to Robbie, because I'm going to ask Robbie about how this was printed. No, I'll ask you, Anne, about the color choice because surely I was a kid of the 80s. The photographs then were already colored, and,
Yes.
and this book is in black and white. Was there a story there? Was that a decision that was made? What's the story behind that?
That was a very firm and clear decision that my mom Munina made. It was an editorial decision. First of all, because she wanted to preserve the sense of the times. Yes, there were color photos. You're right, Nikki, but newspapers were in black and white. So she wanted to preserve that kind of time-bound urgency that black and white um, photos convey. Also because we were dealing with photos from professional photographers as well as from amateur photographers, sending their Kodak photos. So we also had to kind of have a uniformity to the pages. So she decided to do black and white. So it would be even throughout whether you are a professional photographer or an amateur photographer, which is very much a people power thing to do. So I really believe that the power of the images, even today, is because they're in black and white.
But and there's something about the quality of these black and white photos. They're not your usual. I mean,
Yeah.
what explains it? There's something about this book that makes it of a certain quality.
Well, yeah, Robbie would be in a better position to
Okay.
explain that. But let me just say that my mom also insisted that although they're black and white, they're color separated so
Yes.
that you get all the depth and tone of of a black and
There is
white.
something,
Some
yeah.
people think, and Robbie will talk more about this, but some people think that we rushed it. That's why we made it black and white, so that it's just two color printing. But that's not true. It's full color printing, black and white.
Oh, wow. Okay, Robbie, I'm about to go to you, but before I
Yes.
go, may I just say that so many, because we started selling the book on Saturday as planned. So people were inquiring about whether they could buy the print copy, even if this is already ebook. No? So you can tell that the print copy is something people want. So Robbie, tell us about how you got this printed, and maybe you can continue from where Anne left off also.
So Anne was right. No, this was a full color uh, printing, meaning to say we had to produce films in cyan, magenta, all the four colors. Um, and my job as a managing editor, together with our late good family friend Karen Hernandez Montinola. Our job really was to manage the crowd. I mean, if you ask me, this was like a continuation of what we had been doing since 1983. I mean, I entered Ateneo in 1984, and the very first activity that I joined was actually a march to Malacanang. I mean, literally during those 2 years, my first 2 years in Ateneo, the streets were our classroom. You know, there was a time that we would march. Can you imagine marching from Ateneo to Malacanang to Mendiola every Friday? That was what we did. Um, and working on this book, actually for me, it was like sort of a combination of the whole thing, because many of the people who volunteered and joined us in this work were actually the very same people that we were marching with, to Malacanang, the very same people that we stood shoulder to shoulder with on EDSA, slept on the streets of EDSA in front of Vivi Soliven, in front of Camp Crame, and later on in Libis. So it was for me a culmination, parang a graduation, no, of all the efforts that we did during those 2 3 years.
But you're the one who had this handled the printing, right?
With my mom. After the chaos of the fun chaos of working with everybody, my mom and I spent almost a month in Hong Kong because we had it printed there because my dad wanted the best. Uh, our problem then actually was we had to wait for the paper, because it was, I don't remember where we got the paper, but we had to wait for it to arrive in Hong Kong before we could actually print.
So that is our story for the book, the physical print copy. But now we are launching the digital version that can be spread to more people and made accessible to many, many, many more people as a gift to be given and for people to watch in their gadgets, the younger generation. We'll talk some more in conversation later, but before that, um, the Mercado family was really very involved in this, no? Because it was your parents who were involved in this. But there are two other siblings, I think, who uh, were in the book itself that became very iconic. No, they're not here, but I think that's Paulo and Gabe Mercado in the
Yes.
picture, that famous picture with June Keithley, because they were the ones who helped her with the radio. This is Gabe. I don't know if he's still traveling, but I'll share what he wrote here. I was 13 when this book came out. I was proud that it featured not just the stories of my brother and I and of Tita June Keithley, but also of other members of our merry little theater group of writer babies turned into revolutionaries. To be young, willing to give up everything for democracy we believed in, may I discover this kind of love and sacrifice for the country again, even at the age of 50. And of course, there's one more brother, I think, no? It's Wawel. So the page that you can see here, we're not supposed to read it, but I just want to give the context of where we got this quote. This whole page paints a soundscape. You know, the book is not just a visual or a textual feast. It also aimed to capture the palpable spirit, but also the soundscape. In this page, there was June Keithley's voice in the radio, Marcos giving an announcement, but also Lieutenant Corpus of the military saying he sent the alma mater song of the Philippine Military Academy for them to play it in Veritas to remind the soldiers through the song's words of what their ideals are that they committed to. So it's a really strong and rich soundscape. And while we will read, I'm sorry, Robbie will read a passage that Wawel wrote. Okay, so, Robbie, please.
Yes, this is an entry of my late brother Wawel, who was in Libis together with his ASIL companions. So I read. In Libis, sitting there in the half dark, I could hear singing. There was a group from Tondo, and they were singing ballads. I had never heard any of those songs before, but they were very deep and very sad. We all knew that there was danger out there somewhere. That was why many of us really didn't talk for any length of time. We smiled or chuckled, but no one really laughed out loud. The singing, however, went on almost all throughout the night. I was thinking, perhaps singing is ingrained in the Filipino. The Filipino sings when he is scared.
Thank you very much. Again, that's Robbie Mercado who's reading for us on behalf of, or for reading the words of his brother Wawel. And so, with that, about the songs, we've invited Dr. Mike Corosa to perform for us. We gave him the quote and we said, please share with us a song that captures this deep sadness that Filipinos sometimes have. And so he picked Constancio de Guzman's Perlas ng Silangan. Let us all listen to Dr. Mike Corosa.
Kung tawagin ang bayan ko ay perlas ng silangan, sagana na sayaman, may wika pang minamahal. Ngunit nang dito'y nagtahan, iba't ibang dayuhan, yaman ating tunay ay nais pang maagaw ay. Bayan ko, gumising ka at buksan ang iyong mata. Pag-aralan mong lubos na mahango tayo sa dusa. Huwag sanang magbabaya, magsikap at magtiyaga at bigyang lunas bayan nating lumuluha. Bayan ko, gumising ka at buksan ang iyong mata. Pag-aralan mong lubos na mahango tayo sa dusa. parusa, huwag sanang magpabaya, magsikap at magtiyaga, at bigyang lunas bayan nating lumuluha.
Thank you very much, Sir Mike Corosa. Siya po ang chair ng Filipino Department. He was our intermission number between our two conversations. Then we move to a second conversation. If the first conversation was about the book and how it was made with people who took part in making it, our second group of people to talk to are people whose parents are contributors to the book. So they will read an excerpt written by their parent, but they themselves do their own storytelling. They are authors of different kinds. No? So we will start with our first second generation. We'll start with Sarge Lacuesta. As Rafael already mentioned earlier, his father contributed the spine. So I don't know, Sarge, how did you find an excerpt to choose from those many things that your father contributed? Do you have an excerpt for
I
us?
just no, I just searched for my name.
Yes, he does
That's
mention.
no. The reason why I chose an excerpt where I figure in it is because I'm a father myself. No, I'm just trying to imagine. I'm trying to reimagine how it was. It must have been for my father having a son at the time, having children at the time, going through EDSA, and I chose an excerpt that actually shows the actual terror and danger, that was that they felt at the time, that was felt all over the time. It was not a fiesta. There was a fiesta feel, but it was not a fiesta.
Okay. So we're not going to flash the words on the screen. We're going to listen. So Sarge, let's walk us through your father's words.
So 24 February 1986 by Amado L. Lacuesta Jr. My father died in 1997. From here on, everything takes on a highly cinematic, surreal quality as I watch with strange detachment. Events seem to be rushing headlong to certain catastrophe. Tear gassing at Santolan, armored columns moving down EDSA, a total of about 10 enemy battalions advancing from all directions by Ramos's own reckoning. Over the radio, June Keithley is relaying instructions from a former member of the US Special Forces about how to use a bus more efficiently as a barricade, flatten its tires, turn it over on its side, and how to handle tear gas, cover the nose, mouth, and exposed skin with wet cloth, hug the ground since tear gas drifts upward, pick up hot tear gas canisters only with padded fingers, and immerse them in a bucket of water to neutralize the gas. Down the road, the people have come alive suddenly. One of them is lecturing his bourgeois comrades, the nuns and the Namphil people, about the effects of tear gas. Extreme, embarrassing, visceral discomfort, burning sensation in the eyes, nose, throat, and on the skin. I remember being gassed slightly years ago on Ayala Avenue and can guess how bad a larger dose must be. On an impulse, I back the car into a driveway, hoping to keep it safe from passing tanks. Then we begin soaking our blankets with water from the Coleman jug. Over the radio, Ramos asks June Keithley to repeat some telephone numbers and to instruct certain friendly forces to call him there for further note orders. I am amused and shocked. The revolution is actually depending on a commercial telephone line, a civilian broadcaster, and a commercial radio station to establish critical contact with its meager forces, all within earshot of anyone with a cheap transistor radio. It is all too much, even for a B-movie. With a sinking heart, I tell Lolly, my mom, no, and Sarge, we will pray the rosary. They start while I am standing half out of the car, watching the people rally round their flag, their heads, noses, and mouths already covered with handkerchiefs. Everyone else is also preparing for the anticipated Marine advance. I am ashamed over being torn between joining them and looking after my wife and son. It is becoming really dangerous now. The time of reckoning is nearly at hand. Over the radio, Keith Lee tries mightily to keep her composure, but her voice has begun to quaver perceptibly. And when she invites everyone to pray with her in a voice that barely keeps from breaking, I know all is lost. Overcome with anger and frustration and a deep sense of betrayal, I pound the steering wheel and sob my heart out. Lolly starts to cry. Suddenly, I know what I must do, the only thing I can do. I take off my glasses and stuff them into the glove compartment with a headphone radio. I tell Lolly and Sarge to stay in the car and keep the windows closed. I instruct Sarge to take care of his mother. They're still praying the rosary when I leave to join the lost cause. Already the day is breaking. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarge. Sarge, so you were there. How did
Yeah,
that feel from your point of view inside that car?
yes, I was there. I was 15 during EDSA, and I was the one who actually, I'm proud to say, I was the one who actually pressured my parents to join me there because I needed a ride. But, we only had one car at the time because my dad had quit his job as an investment banker about 4 years before that.
You had
We only had,
lakwacha ba? You had
sorry.
lakwacha? You had lakwacha?
I had sorry.
Yeah, you were out to ano ba, parang
No. I was actually out to join the protest at the start, no,
Oh,
right
okay.
before EDSA, and then I asked them to join. And then we brought our only car, and what my father did was he used that car to block White Plains Avenue to block any approaching tanks. No, so I felt a little bit heartbroken, and I was completely in awe of my father, who had placed everything, literally everything he had, on the line.
So, Sarge, let's talk about you now as
Sure.
a storyteller yourself. In the next slide, I'm just showing two of you. You write a lot, but let's talk about two of the more recent ones. Coral Cove has some stuff on sparrow units, you said. No?
Yeah.
So tell us about these two books and how EDSA may have, crept its way into your own storytelling.
I think the dictatorship and EDSA and the political atmosphere afterwards, no, for whether for good or bad, no, pervades my work, all of my work, no, and whatever I write, no, I certainly am not only am I a post-colonial writer and a post-modern writer, I certainly am a post-EDSA writer also, no. It does pervade all I write, and I'm reminded of a scene in one of my stories in Coral Cove, a story called "Not Like Us." No, when a politician sort of waxes sentimentally about how it might have been if Marcos had won EDSA, and the image and the feeling is terrifying. It's terrifying and it's horrific. No, and I can relay that story very well because I understand the feeling. When I was there during EDSA, and I was there even before that, and it took quite a bit of attempts. There were many attempts at disinformation even at the time. I don't know if you remember that, but at that time, the public was the government, the dictatorship before EDSA was trying ever so hard, to convince the people that nothing was happening, that EDSA was nothing. No?
What's
So
funny is
it's this. Sure.
it's funny you say that because right now on the Rizal Library in
Yes.
Ateneo, there is an installation by Carl Castro
Yes.
where there are two big headlines blown up in huge tarps. One headline says there is no martial law, and the other headline says martial law declared. And it's in front, no? Para two conflicting stories right in front of the people. Okay, sorry, continue. Oh,
No, absolutely. And I'm a huge fan of Carl Castro. No? He absolutely understands that, and his focus, except for example, on brutalist architecture, really exemplifies
yes.
how brutalism, it pins down, the human spirit and also celebrates it in a way. Yes, at the time, my father and I would watch the pro Marcos news, and my father would resort to shouting at the television set, no, telling them that it was not so. No.
He also shared like how he would tape in the recorder. Like when he announces something, he would tape it in a cassette tape just to say, "Look, he said this. I remember he said this." But let's talk about
Absolutely.
your other book also. Now look at the title, Joy. You just mentioned earlier that it was not a fiesta, and yet you capture a lot of the happy parts of Filipino life. So tell us
I,
about
you know, yeah, we are a happy people. No? We are happy people. Happy in despair, no? Happy when we're angry also. No, I would like to see the day when our happiness is no longer as fleeting as it is now. No, the novel Joy is about a kind of happiness that's connected to kind of fleeting happiness. In fact, there's some glancing reference to chicken joy, no, to the joy we feel when we eat something of our own. No, we will when the joy we feel when we feel physical pleasure, no, or some kind of fleeting emotional pleasure. No, I would like to live to see the day when my own son enjoys a kind of everlasting joy, the joy of democracy, the joy of freedom, certainly the joy of being able to do and say whatever he wants with freedom, and to share this joy with other people, and for us to be a source of joy to other people in the world, to be a beacon of joy, real joy.
Thank you very much, Sarge,
Thank you.
sharing. I now move to our next speaker. Our next speaker, um, her mother, Tita Lulu Castañeda, also wrote something, and our next speaker, Leah Castañeda Anastasio, is a different kind of storyteller, so different the one from Sarge. No, the tone is she's a legal historian, so the books and publications that she writes are of a very very different line. But Leah, you picked something to share with us also. Maybe I'll ask you first to read your mother's words, and then I'll ask you your own experience.
Yeah, okay, thank you. So happy to be here. So I'm not sure what day this was from, but it's on page 124 to 125 of the print of the book. So when we were alerted to meet the tanks, I was very self-conscious about two things: my hat and the person beside me. I was wearing a Christian Dior hat because it was drizzling and I looked so bourgeois. I wanted to take it off, but my daughter Leah stopped me. She said, "Don't, mommy, you'll get sick. You always catch a cold when you get wet in the rain." I told her, "What are you worried about? We are going to die. I have no time to catch a cold." We were told to link arms. I looked at the faces of the people around me, and especially at the man to my right who was holding on tightly to my arm. My big concern was, I'm going to die with this man, and I don't know his name. I wanted to ask his name, but then I didn't want him to think that I was fresh. I didn't ask his name. As utter strangers, we faced what seemed like imminent death together. I did say the act of contrition truly and heartily, and I said the Hail Mary, especially the part which goes, "Pray for us now and at the hour of our death." That seemed the same at the moment, now at the hour of our death. I really knew then what that means to ask the Blessed Mother to be with me, with all of us at the hour of our death. My deepest concern was for my daughter because she was so young, only 17. I looked at her with pain and said, "She's only 17 and she's going to die." Then I also thought, but if she dies for the country, then it is a good way to die. I think a lot of people were there for the same reason.
Thank you so much, Leah. What time is it there in the US?
I think it's about four something in the morning,
Thank you.
4:53.
Tell us about that experience from your perspective, because this was told from your mother's perspective.
um, I actually didn't feel. I, I probably was a little oblivious to the danger. I was. It seemed just really very exciting to be there. Um, yeah, so it was. I don't know. I guess deep down in my gut, and I don't know if it's like in hindsight that I felt that I didn't really see shooting happening. Although, yeah, I don't know if it was faith or I don't know what it was, but I didn't get that sense that it was going to be the end. But it was, it was a very formative to be there. Really amazing experience. So and for me, it kind of seemed like, because I'd been exposed to, I guess the whole, I lived through the dictatorship. I grew up during martial law. I didn't know any other president until 1986. And I'd been hearing, my mom had had connections to two who later became very prominent in the Aquino government, especially in forming the Constitution. So she was a law student at the Ateneo Law School. So I'd been hearing about all these goings on from that time, and somehow it felt like a one big story that was, because they had the Aquino assassination and then the Batasan elections. So, but by that time, it just seemed like to me like a progression that was going to culminate in something like an amazing resolution. I don't know why. It seemed like an amazing story that was unfolding in real time in my life. So yeah, I don't know if it's probably not what people remember, but that's the impression that I got when I was there.
But it sounds like it will relate to how you, or to the things you published afterwards.
Yeah.
Take a look at the next slide. So this is the more recent work, but before that, you've also been digging into studying the Constitution. I remember you saying you wanted to ask the question, how did we get here? And so this not about this book, but about your writing, being a legal historian and studying our Constitution. Was that in any way shaped by people power?
Well, people power, I guess, was the climax of that questioning, but the curiosity was planted a long, long time before that. Because my mom was a student; she was studying at Ateneo Law School in around, I think, 1976 when she started, and the campus then was in Ateneo Padre Faura, and she was part of this sorority whose I guess advisor was none other than Justice Cecilia Munoz Palma. And she would walk over to the St. Thomas More Chapel for Mass every day, and she would be our organist for Sunday Mass. And one day I remember just kind of, eavesdropping on a conversation, and she was telling my mom that she was getting death threats. And I'm like, what? And I said, why would anybody want to kill this woman? I mean, she's my Lola's friend. So I'm like, but then my mom said, well, she's actually a justice, and she was dissenting in these big cases in the Supreme Court. Around the same time, my mom was also the student of then Dean Joaquin Bernas, Father Bernas. And he was, both of them, Justice was the president of the Constitutional Commission in 87. And of course, Father Bernas was one of the main architects of the 87 Constitution. But my mom would talk about how Father would rant about how Marcos's maneuvers, how he made everything legal. I guess that was very jarring to me, thinking about how is all this, it just seems so antithetical, it just seems so contradictory, and how is this all legal? So the questioning started like a long, long time ago.
During martial
And pre-martial law. So, you're living through this and you're seeing all these, salvagings and all that stuff going on, and you're trying to make sense of it. So I guess it was always a big question, and I could never really figure out until I learned more. So yeah.
And let's talk about this latest book, The Marcos Era, that you edited together with Patricia Abinales, right? Which was also
Yeah.
released by Ateneo Press. Tell us about this.
Yeah, so I wrote for this book an article on the Marcos era, on the Marcos cases. And what I focused on were a set of cases that I felt established all the prerogatives of his rule. So that would have started in, I guess, in the 70s up to about 73. The infrastructure, I guess, for his governance was set by those cases. But I wouldn't have been able to unpack that because the key to understanding those cases, I felt, really lay in the American period. So in a way, these were the cases that piqued my curiosity, but in trying to understand them, I was led to go way back to the American colonial period. So I guess I made those ties in those articles to show how actually the cases really fit within the whole, the whole ideological and institutional design of the Philippine Constitution that was set up in the colonial period. Yeah, and then built upon later on. So it wasn't really anathematic to the system. It was it really actually fit the system, ironically. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Leah. 4 a.m. for making you talk about these things. But you see, we've had Sarge and Leah, two very different kinds of writings. And we have a third one. Thank you, Leah. And for
Thank you.
third one now. When we were gathering testimonials, I happened to read this. And when I read it, I said, I mean, I don't know her, we don't know each other, but I reached out and I said, may we invite you because she fits the theme of someone whose parent wrote a contribution, an entry, and it led to her own storytelling. And her publication is very different from the first two that you've just talked about. So let me introduce Rina Mapa. She describes herself as an artist. And Rina, can you pick an excerpt to read from your father, I think, no? Tony Map.
Thank you. Thank you for having me so much. So this section was about the campaigning. And my dad wrote, the weekend before elections, I flew south to campaign among the workers and personnel of our farms in Negros. In the past elections, they had always been instructed to vote for administration candidates and were expecting to be similarly instructed this time. My dad likes using quotes, ironic quotes. We told them they were free to vote for whomever they wished, but we asked them to listen to our campaign. In one large field, I anxiously waited as more than 160 laborers emerged from the tall cane stalks and gathered to hear my plea. I was deeply moved when, at the end of my short speech, an elderly worker stood up to say how greatly pleased they were to learn that the owners had come to ask them, instead of ordering them, to vote for the same candidate they had set their hearts on. In the past, these people simply nodded obediently or passively to similar exhortations. This time, they responded with outright cheers, jubilation, and emphatic laban signs. And they were a good 600 kilometers away from the influence of Makati. Heading further south, I could only shake my head in admiration for the Cory Doy posters that practically every house displayed all throughout the 120-kilometer stretch of scenic road that runs down the eastern coastline of Negros. Enthusiastically outstretched arms flashed the familiar Laban sign when our Cory Doy banner caught the attention of folk by the roadside, as well as drivers, passengers, and roof riders of oncoming vehicles. Even fishermen 160 yards out at sea frantically waved their hands at us. That evening, during a rally, school teachers, farm accountants, tractor drivers, some very eloquently, others forcefully, and still others pleading in near tears, were telling their rapt listeners to realize that selling their votes for a measly 2 to 3 days of temporary happiness would lead to another 6 years of tyranny, ruin, and suffering. While Metro Manila had its peso for Cory, people's contribution, Poblacion, Palanas, and Bais also had its own centavos for Cory, and it was a truly moving experience to see these plain small town folk eagerly reach out to drop their few centavos into bamboo containers being passed around. I couldn't see then how Cory and Doy would lose.
Nikki, you're muted.
Sorry, I thought it was
Sorry,
me.
I wanted to say that what's good about what you shared is that it's outside of Metro Manila, showing us that it is a Philippine revolution and not just the EDSA revolution. We have to go beyond. But where were you when the 4 days happened?
So I was safe in my house, unfortunately,
Yeah.
and in Alabang at the time. And my dad and my mom were actually part of a bunch of people who were able to get into Camp Crame before the gates closed.
They were there.
So
Yeah.
they were there. They were there with a bunch of nuns, a Butsakino, and just a handful of people. Whereas me, my older brother, Tonton Mapa, who actually told me he knows Sarge from Diliman, I believe. And I and our three younger siblings were stuck complaining about it. Obviously, we wanted to be there where the action was. But at the time also, we lived near General Ramos's house. So a whole bunch of people from the village decided to congregate around his house to see if they could protect him, and that was our way of feeling involved
Yes.
in the the protests.
And your parents were in the thick of things.
So
So
our parents were in the real.
they were right there at the
Yeah, we were in the fake. They were in the real. Yes, they were in the thick of it. They were stuck there. And then when they finally opened the gates, my parents went out and joined the rest of joined the
So
rest of the
let's talk about what you published.
yes.
So let's take a look at your book. It's Duran Duran, Imelda Marcos, and me. And this is illustrated, right? Because you're an artist, and you said that the book helped you. It was a very valuable source for when you were writing this. So tell us about this book. When did it come out? How did it come about? And how did the book help you in finishing this project?
Well, I began writing my book as a sort of therapy because my dad died in a car accident about 17 years ago now. And a few years later, I was still having difficulty dealing with his death because we were very, very close. And then I realized I wanted to. I had moved to Canada. I had been living in Canada at that point for many years, and I felt disconnected, I suppose, from the Philippines. Even if I came back and visited often, I felt like my identity I was losing my identity, especially after my dad's death. So this was a way of capturing that back, of bringing everything that I knew and loved from my childhood back to life. Um, when I started writing stories about my childhood, of course, the whole martial law, remembering, that whole time with people power was so much forefront that I decided to make it the background of my own autobiography. The People Power book was an enormous influence in how I wrote my book because I remember reading it so often. I mean, before, even when I was, a teenager. My parents, I suppose, my family knew quite a bit of the people involved. My brother was classmates with uh, um, Robbie Mercado. I believe I was batchmates with Gabe, his brother. And my tito actually was Tita Noel Trinidad is married to Lali Laurel, who is the niece of Doy Laurel. So there were a lot of connections there. Their son Michael even has a write up in the People Power book as well. He was 13, and he has a little blurb. So because of that, I grew up reading this book really hard. I read it often, and I automatically turned to it to remind myself of these stories. And I just saw it as all as a movie happening, and I wanted to draw it in a cinematic feel. In my mind, it was like a movie, so I tried to capture that in my book. So,
Thank you very much. Um, Rina is our last. So we have had Sarge, we've had Leah, and we've had Rina. And I guess the goal here is to see how a book can lead to other kinds of storytelling.
Sorry, may I just
Yes, Rina.
interrupt? Yes, sorry. My book came out in 2017, and since then I've gotten so many emails from young people,
Yes.
young Filipinos especially who live abroad, who say they had no idea this kind of thing had happened. They were so surprised. It made them more interested in researching what happened in the country because I guess it's accessible in the form of a graphic novel. So if there are any young people listening today, I really hope that they, buy the People Power book because it's so accessible. That's the thing. It's like stories written by people, and all in a very the way it's told is cinematic. I find it's really a brilliant book, underrated, and I just hope everyone buys a copy.
Thank you very much, Rina. You see, exactly that's the goal to get more people, and especially young people, to get access to this book. So we don't have a grand launch because honestly, last Saturday we already started selling the book, and the response has, over the weekend, because I posted it on on Facebook, I received so many inquiries, so many questions, especially from people who are overseas, who are really hungry for access to materials like this. And when this was released by Ateneo Press, it was at the special launch price of only 100 pesos last Saturday. So to respond to the launch, we have the director of the Rizal Library, um, a book historian, a librarian, and book historian, Dr. Von Totanes. So Von will talk about the book to ebook. Von, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. I hope I'm clear.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, good, good. So I just want to thank Nikki and the Department of Interdisciplinary Studies, the Ateneo Press, uh, for giving us a copy of this book. We do have the print copy from 1986, but now we have the ebook that we can actually lend to all of our faculty and students. But before I go into that, uh, I would just like to add a little more context to the discussion. Many stories have already been told about people power, including the book itself. But I'm not sure those who were not born yet uh, appreciate the difference in terms of book publishing and libraries. What's the difference between 1986 and 2023? The most obvious one is that computers were not easily accessible. So can you try to imagine making changes in the text? These were actually crossed out by hand and then given to the printer for them to fix. Layouts were not made on Adobe Photoshop or Illustrator or whatever they're using nowadays. They were made with pencils, rulers, cutters. And we had to wait for blueprints to see if the printer produced the layout we wanted to achieve. So that's book publishing, and there are actually many more changes that have occurred over the past decades. What about libraries? At that point, if I wanted to borrow People Power, the book, from the library, I'd go there with my library card, get the book, fill up the library card, sign my name at the back of the book, and have the librarian stamp the book. And now we get to, okay, so why am I being thankful for this digital edition that is being given to the Rizal Library? Because in case you didn't know, okay, and this is for the alumni who haven't visited the Rizal Library in decades, as well as the students who are actually at the Rizal Library or have access to the online databases of the Rizal Library. The biggest difference now, okay, is that you can actually read this book online for free on the Rizal Library's online access. Okay. Sorry, but the alumni don't actually have access to these databases right now. If you're faculty or if you're a student, I hope you know that you can log in to the Rizal Library's off-campus access, and then you can just look for Ateneo de Manila University Press. You actually have access to all of the Ateneo Press's ebooks that are available online, and which is actually most of them are available. And then you just click on People Power, and Nikki can actually share my screen.
I think you can.
Okay, let me just share. Oh, okay. Someone is sharing the screen. Okay. And I hope you can see my screen right now.
Yes, we can.
And and you can just turn the pages like this. And well, the biggest difference here is that you can actually click on the table of contents. And the biggest difference in terms of content is the introduction to the digital edition. Okay. But yeah, so this is more easily searchable now. And that's it. I just
Wow.
wanted to show you the book.
Thank
And
you. Yeah.
yeah,
Thank you very much, Juan,
thank
because
you very much. And that's it for me. Thank you.
thank you so much. So Vaughn showed us what the book looks like for the young people or for anybody who will be using the ebook and the clickable table of contents. You see the goal. So Vaughn actually he didn't share, but he was living in Camp Aguinaldo at the time of People Power. His father, I think, was with ISAF. Okay? He was with the military, and Vaughn shared his testimonial of how the book helped explain to him the context and what was happening. Thank you very much, Vaughn, for walking us through the digital copy of the book and
Thank
how to
you. Thank you.
access it in the library. You see, the main goal really of putting this ebook out there is not just to make it more accessible to many people who um, already know of the book or who had lost their copies of the book and want to see it again. It's really also to bring it to a new audience. It's to pass people power to the next generation. And that is why we endeavored to invite people who were the young ones then, who are now parents themselves, and they want to pass the stories and the pictures and the text to the next generation. I'm sharing here on screen um, my children are here on the right side, and we also have other kids who gave their picture with the book. And so we have a response. We'll hear from one of the young people. We're going to hear a message from Gabby Mercado.
I'm 17, so I wasn't born for the events of the People Power Revolution 37 years ago. So it is easy for people like me to take historical events lightly. Like, we often think of history as just that, a significant moment of the past. The 2 million people who showed up to protest those few days, it's just a number to us. It's hard to understand what it actually means. So, my grandmother, Monina Mercado, worked to compile a book of people's stories of the revolution. The book conveys feelings of humanity, that every person there has a story. 2 million individual people, 2 million stories as to what they're fighting for. Even as even as the times change, we must not forget these moments of history that are important to who we are today.
Thank you very much. So that was Gabby Mercado. And now, before we present um, a final song number that we want to share to end this book launch. On Friday, we were supposed to have this launch, and it was abruptly declared as a public holiday. Um, Very well planned ahead of time, public holiday, being sarcastic. And it was a blessing in disguise because on that day also we started receiving messages, links to a song that was just released. It was the Handog song, and it was very fortunate because Anne Mercado Alcantara said she knew and she can invite the director behind that new video. Maybe some of you have seen it, maybe others have not yet, and you'll see it for the first time. It's going to be a treat. So we've invited Mike Alcazaran to join us today to talk about how they put this video together. You see, the book people power, just like this launch and just like this video, is the coming together of many people volunteering their time, their energy, their resources. There's something magical about people coming together and getting things done because they're united by the same kind of spirit. And it is in that tone and that note that we uh, just asked him, can you come join us and introduce this video for us today? It's also driven by the same motivation to bring a message that they already told the story and tell it again, this time because they want the youth, we want the youth to be part of this telling. Mike, I'll give you the floor to introduce to us this video.
Good evening, everyone. First of all, thank you for inviting me. So many feels. I'm sorry, it's been very emotional, a very emotional week, especially for me because we had to finish the video on time, and we were also screening our martial law documentary. But I mean, just the flood of all the memories, especially when Sarge was narrating his father's experience. So it all came back to me and I started tearing up. So just a backgrounder, handog ng Pilipino sa mundo, for those who were not born in or who were not in 86, that was our victory song. So if we had our fight song as Bayan Ko, Handog was the victory song. It was composed by Jim Paredes and launched in March 1986. So I have come full circle because the Handog ng Pilipino original video was my very first job, literally straight from graduation. I drove my car to J. Nakpil, to the editing suite, to help edit with Mike De Leon, the original video for Handog. And some of the footage was also from my footage because my medium was not still camera. I lugged around a Super 8 camera. So like Anne, I was 21 years old from Ateneo. And like Robbie said, every week there was a rally. So I would go out and shoot footage of the rallies, and some of them were peaceful, some were violent. I was also tear gassed. I experienced tear gassing, and of course in EDSA I was there with my camera capturing some moments which you will see later on in the music video. And like Nikki said, this was also done. The remake was done at the urging of the OGs, original gangsta of Jim, Celeste, Leia, and behind the scenes, Emily Abrera. Originally was just a reunion video, but then we got to talking. I just got the phone call in Feb 1, and they said, "Oh, we were rearranging Handog ng Pilipino from a common friend. Would you like to direct the video?" I said, what do I do? I mean, who are your singers? So they were still busy gathering the singers, and they said, "Bahala ka na, Mike." And I jumped at the chance because I worked on the first one. So the direction was clear, like what I'm now seeing is the theme of this book, the relaunch of the ebook, the version, was to update the song, not only in the musical arrangement, but even in the way we would feature new singers, because we are passing the torch nga, because essentially Handog ng Pilipino is also telling the story of the people power revolution, and we wanted to include the next generation. So you will see in the video that we invited some new singers. Of course, the most famous is sila Nika Del Rosario, Rosa's fame, and Gab Pangilinan. But the others were the rappers Elmo and Arkin Magalona. Half of the singers I had to Google during the shoot because I didn't know them personally, but they had like tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of followers. So we went on, and everything was so organic, and so many people volunteered. In the end, we had about 50 plus singers who volunteered to appear on the video, and we had a professional studio, and the one who helped arrange it is Richie Chan. He's a theater person also, and the makeup artist, but also a singer. And he helped gather choral, all of these people together in a small studio, and I had to conceptualize what to put in the video, together with some of the original hand dog singers. So it was quite an experience, but everyone, it just brought back the spirit of EDSA, the spirit of volunteerism, of being there for helping each other. There were no egos during the shoot. We were talking to each other, we were laughing, and more importantly, we were connecting with the newer generation. There were kids, Gen Z kids, who were sound techs that we were talking to, and also even the singers, because I had to contextualize how they would sing the chorus, because they did not experience what happened in People Power, and I wanted them to have their own emotions flow. So one of the big decisions was to invite the drag queens, which was absolutely a joy for me, and to bring in also the next generation, and to make the message of EDSA more inclusive, and to go beyond what happened in the political arena. So we were talking about humanity, of empathy, of the spirit of giving, so extending beyond. So maybe let's view the video first, and I can tell you more about what happened behind the scenes.
Di na ako papayag mawala ka muli. Di na ako papayag na muling mabawi. Ating kalayaan kay tagal na nating mithi. Di na papayagang mabawi muli. Magkakapit bisig, libo-libong tao. Kay sarap palang maging Pilipino. Sama-sama iisa ang adhikain. Kailanman di na paaalipin. Handog ng Pilipino sa mundo. Mapayapa para ang pagbabago. Katotohanan, kalayaan, katarungan ay kayang makamit na walang dahas. Basta't magkaisa tayong lahat. Sama-sama tayo'y ikaw at ako. Basta lang nagaganap sa aming bayan, magkasama ng mahirap at mayaman. kapit bisig, madre, pari at sundalo. Naging langit itong bahagi ng mundo.
Huwag muling payagang umiralang dilim.
Tinig ng bawat tao'y bigyan ng pansin. Magkakapatid lahat sa Panginoon. Ito'y lagi nating tatandaan. Huwag na nating kalimutan. Tignan at pagmasdan ng nagaganap sa ating bayan. Ang layunan ng mahihirap sa mayayaman. Tinig ng mga tao na bigyan ba ng pansin. Di ba natin mahahanap ang liwanag sa dilim? Di ako papayag, maniig ang dilim. Di ako nanahimik ng ingay na sinungaling. Kalayaan, katarungan, katotohanan, ito ang laban ko.
Isabuhay ang kalayaan. On that note, we put this book launch to an end with a call to action and invitation to keep retelling the stories, to gather more stories, and maybe, who knows, we can all work together and maybe come up with another People Power book for the 40th, for the 50th anniversary. We invite you to like our People Power page on Facebook, where we will post all the testimonials, the video of this book launch, and all other stories that we will gather in the future. We would like to thank the following people, the following institutions who've helped us: the Mercado family for their generosity and sharing their family's work with the rest of the Philippines; Ateneo de Manila University Press; the Department of Interdisciplinary Studies staff who ran the show today; and the School of Humanities and the School of Social Sciences, the Rizal Library, the Digital Information and Technology Services team for assisting us today, and the University Marketing and Communications Office. Thank you, everybody, for joining today's book launch. You have until today to get the special launch prize of 100 pesos. But even after, it's only 220 pesos, a very friendly price. We have launched the digital edition of People Power, an eyewitness history, the Philippine Revolution of 1986. Thank you for joining us. Isabuhay ang kalayaan. Goodbye, everybody.
Thank you, Nikki. That was wonderful. Thank you. Thank you.
No, we can still keep talking.